Welcome to GG33 Podcast 6. In today's podcast, we will be discussing socialism, communism, and women. Yes, there's a connection, and I'm going to connect the dots for all of you. And the thing we're going to start off the show with today is one of the mysteries that people haven't been able to figure out in life. And what that mystery is why the Chinese are building ghost cities. The Chinese are building ghost cities all across their country. You know, these cities are capable of sustaining millions of people. Why would a nation build infrastructure? I mean, some of these places look like Paris. Other places in the world, they put a lot of money into this for no one to be living there. Why would anyone do this? Some people will say, they want to, the socialists want to give their people jobs. Okay, that's fine, but, they could be doing other things. This makes no sense. Then again, if you know a lot about a lot, you can start making connections that other people can't. And because you can make those connections, you start understanding and putting the pieces together. Let me give you an example. I'm going to start throwing some astrology in here. You see, the reason the Chinese are building ghost cities is because they want cities inland. Shanghai, Beijing, those are all by water, right by the ocean. And the Chinese know the sea levels are going to rise. See, they're not dumb like these liberals in America who are going to tell you, we need to tax carbon to put people out of work. You're not going to solve the problem because the sea levels are not rising because of CO2 and man-made pollution. To put this in perspective, imagine the vastness of the ocean. 70 to 75% of land of Earth is covered in water. You think that if you take one can of Pepsi Cola and you pour it in the ocean, you think that's going to destroy the whole ozone? That's arrogance to even think that. Now, are humans having some effect? Yes, but they're not to the point of changing the climate. But I'm not going to be like one of these Republicans and say climate change ain't happening, because it is. So now the question becomes, Gary, if you're saying climate change is happening but it's not man-made, what is actually causing it? Why, glad you asked. And that is why you guys are lucky I'm an astrologer and numerologist. Because I can put together things most people cannot. Let's go over here. The age of Aquarius. When the age of Aquarius hits, sea levels will rise. I'm not quite sure why other astrologers haven't put this together yet. But then again, I've told you many times, 95% of these people are frauds. All they do is read books by other people, and they're like, I know it all. Especially Western astrologers. That's so opinion-based with so little facts. But when it comes down here, what's interesting about the Aquarius is the Aquarius is called the water bearer. Yet it's not a water sign. Water sign, Pisces, Cancer, and Scorpio. So why is Aquarius the water bearer? Because you see, astrology tells us things if we know how to read between the lines. In the age of Aquarius, sea levels will rise. This is a given. And the age of Aquarius started when that happened. 9/11. That fateful day where we all remember what happened. I remember when I woke up, I thought I was watching Die Hard on TV. But after I got the numerology, I started putting everything together. You see, 9/11 happened on the 11th. First plane to hit the World Trade Center was Flight 11. New York City, 11 letters. New York, the 11th state of the Union. It's all there. So the people who put this together, they made a shift, an energy shift, a conscious shift. They wanted a big move to mark the age of Aquarius. They wanted to shift that mentality. That's exactly what happened. Because the world changed that day. That is still, to this day, the biggest event of this century, 9/11. That changed everything. I mean, for people who don't remember this country before 9/11, 2001, you actually had freedoms back then. I mean, real freedoms. The cops couldn't do these no-knock searches. They had a lot of limitations on what they could do. After the Patriot Act, that was all over. But you have to understand that how these people operate is they always try to blind the message in a noble act, like the Patriot Act. That did nothing but strip civil liberties from Americans. But they did it under cover of patriotism. That's why the Patriots, New England Patriots, won the Super Bowl that year. Oh, brainwashing. Same thing with anything else. So when 9/11 happened, the Rothschilds wanted to mark it with a bang. So they built the World Trade Center. See, a lot of people don't understand how this works. I believe in 1993, a sheik tried to bomb the World Trade Center from a garage. He obviously failed, but he wanted to do that because he was aware of the plan, and he wanted to hit it before it actually happened. See, a lot of planning went into 9/11. And for God's sake, the buildings look like the 11 side by side. And guess what? Let's go back here to the Aquarius. The Aquarius happens to be the 11th sign. Starting to connect the dots here. So basically, now that we've established that the sea levels will rise, now that we established why, because of numerology and astrology, now that we established the symbolism behind 9/11 and everything that happened, marking the start of the age of Aquarius, now we can go back to the Chinese cities. The Chinese know the sea level's rising. And unlike the ignorant liberals in this country who want to basically do carbon taxes and put people out of business, the Chinese are just building inland. That's exactly what Americans should be doing. We need to start building mega cities around Nebraska, Kansas, inland, Denver. I mean, why do you think the CIA has moved all their headquarters to Denver? Why do you think the Denver Underground Airport? Do you know what kind of stuff that goes on around the Denver airport? They got rid of a perfectly good airport, Staples, in the mid-90s to build this thing. It looks very strange, and there's very strange paintings around it. Look it up. Denver Airport. You don't need me to tell you that. But, having said that, this is what America used to do. They didn't accept that New York City, Miami, San Diego, Los Angeles, San Francisco are going to have problems in the age of Aquarius. It is time to build inland like the Chinese. They are preparing for this. They are going about the right way. Building megacities now inland, so when that day comes, they can move without a glitch. America, you're going to have some problems if you don't follow my exact instructions. During the age of Aquarius, the sea levels will rise. And there's nothing you can do with a carbon tax or any... The arrogance of these people, that they think they can put a tax on something and stop it. I mean, these people are straight brain dead. It is what it is. So, now that I've connected one of the biggest mysteries in life, now I'd like to go to part 2 of today's program. Women, socialism, and communism. You see, women's rights passed in America in 1920. The exact day was 8/18/1920, an 11 day. Sure, that was a coincidence that happened on an 11 day. Sure it was. And from that time period, there's been a lot of change in the world. And the case I'm going to make to you is it hasn't had a very good effect. Let's get started. 1917, the Russian Revolution. The Bolsheviks are coming to power. The communists are coming to power. But in 1917, the Tsar was still in power. Bolsheviks weren't strong enough to overthrow him. So what do? You start getting the people who are the most emotionally triggered in your society to act. Those being women.
On the 23rd of February 1917, thousands of women took to the streets of the Russian capital, Petrograd, to mark International Women's Day and protest over bread shortages. The next day, they were joined on the streets by workers and students carrying placards that read, "Down with the Tsar." True.
Let me replay that just because of some technical difficulties. I want you to listen to this again. What they're talking about, what happened in 1917.
On the 23rd of February 1917, thousands of women took to the streets of the Russian capital, Petrograd, to mark International Women's Day and protest over bread shortages. The next day, they were joined on the streets by workers and students carrying placards that read, "Down with the Tsar."
So the Russian Revolution started with women marching. Women. But what you're going to tell me is, Gary, this was over 100 years ago. Okay. You know, one thing you have to understand about socialists is they understand that they can't win the logic debate, so they base everything on emotions. And who is emotionally triggered the most? Women. Let's talk about Hugo Chavez. Hugo Chavez, just like Lenin, who started the Soviet Revolution, was a horse. The guy who started the Russian Revolution was a horse, born in the horse year, and so was Hugo Chavez, another horse. But besides the astrology and their ideology, they had something else in common. Women. Women supported them by 90%. In 2002, the CIA in America overthrew Hugo Chavez. They installed some kind of puppet, and this lasted a few days. And the reason this lasted a few days is because the women of Venezuela went to the streets. So many of them that the army had no choice but to release Hugo Chavez, and the American-backed coup failed. Now, I could lecture the CIA about starting a coup against someone born in a horse year in 2002, a horse year, but not a good way to do things, guys. Really isn't. But it is what it is. Yet, Venezuela, after 2002, started going down the socialist path. Now people in Venezuela are starving. They're literally looking through trash cans for food. There's no more animals in the streets either. Because if you're a cat and dog in the streets, you will get hunted and you will get eaten. That's how bad things are in Venezuela. Venezuela was the richest country in all of Latin America. That changed as soon as the socialists came to power. And at the very beginning, it was good because the socialists were spending a lot of money. The socialists had high oil. Venezuela has a lot of oil. Well, when oil prices were high, he could afford a lot of social programs. But once he didn't diversify his economy, because communists never do, all they can rely on is one source. What happened? When oil prices went down, his regime went down. And now people there are starving. Yet, if you go back to the people who put him in power, just like Lenin, it was women. What is the end result of this? Hundreds of millions of people have died as a result of communism. Joseph Stalin, Vladimir Lenin, literally committed Holocaust in Ukraine, literally committed genocides. They tried to exterminate different races. Because you have to understand, when communists come to power, they can't allow any more free speech. They can't allow any more dissent. Because once you get a taste of communism, you're not going to like it. So you're going to try to revolt. But see, they're not going to allow that to happen. They need you right now to overthrow the capitalists and who don't have secret police who are just going to shoot you in the head or kidnap you and put you in concentration camps. That doesn't happen here. And because that doesn't happen here, the communists take advantage of something called useful idiots. They use you people as a proxy to throw over the government, but once it moves to communism and you get a taste of what communism actually is, you're not going to like it. But then it's too late. By then they're going to line you up against the wall. I believe episode 1 I talked about how the liberals and the religious people in Iran overthrew the Shah in 1979, and then the liberals thought they're going to have a power-sharing government. Wrong. They were all lined up against the wall and shot. That's what happens to useful idiots. Because the end result of communism is always the same. Starvation, poverty, breeds criminality. And women, unfortunately, they like communism because from their maternal nature, women want people to take care of them. And what has happened since the women's right movement has basically started in the 1920s? Well, in the 1960s, it turned into feminism. Right there. 1960, the first wave of feminism. Well, actually, the second wave, excuse me. The first wave was 1920. Second wave of feminism started telling women they were oppressed because they're housewives. Raising kids is oppressive. But now you see what happens when the women don't raise the kids and the women go to work. See, what feminism did was basically a few things. Number one, the government couldn't tax women before the women's rights movement. So it could only tax half the population. As soon as the women came in the workforce, it could start taxing everybody. So the big winner of this, not women, the government. Secondly, women ain't raising the kids anymore, which means the state gets a hold of those kids and it starts indoctrinating them at a much younger age. That's never a good thing. So it's a double whammy. Because as those kids get older and they're raised by single women, because women now think they're oppressed. They want a divorce. They want to sleep around and be pigs like men have always been. Who suffers? The kids. The kids have no father in their house. If you notice, a lot of these people nowadays, a lot of these Black Lives Matter, Antifa people, the men, they like to hit women. Watch a lot of these videos, you'll see they like to hit women. And the reason that is because they were raised by women and they feel comfortable talking back to women. But once a man comes around, they shut their beta ass down real quick. You'll notice that. After women's rights passes, one of the things is it starts affecting the demographics of a nation. You need 2.1 kids per family to sustain a population? Well, since the women aren't at home anymore and they're actually working, well, they're not having as many kids, logically. So what you have to understand is the demographics of a nation start going down. Here's an article. Fertility rate for white women plummets below the limit needed to maintain a population every single U.S. state. Why is that important? Because if white women, and the majority of women in America are white, this is not a racial thing, are not producing enough kids, well, you have two choices. Either, number one, you go the way of Japan, and Japan allows almost no immigration, and their population has about 1.5 kids per family. So what happens is, as the population gets older, there's a lot of stress on the younger generation to pay for the Social Security and all the stuff the older people are going to get. So it stagnates a society. So what happens is, a society that doesn't want to go that route, it only has one other route to go: immigration. So when Republicans tell you that you don't need immigrants, they're lying to you. Because to maintain Social Security, to maintain everything, we need that 2.1 per family. So when someone comes in, someone from Mexico comes in, when someone from another country comes in, their kids start having about 2.7, 2.6 kids per family. And again, these are obviously ratios. People don't have 2.6 kids, they have like 3 or 4 kids. But it all evens out. And because they do that, their population's able to grow. But what happens is you start changing the demographics of a society. And that's the same thing with LGBT. These people don't have kids. This is not bigoted, this is fact. Because they don't have kids, it brings down the demographics of a nation. That is why every Western society, which has embraced women's rights and LGBT, the demographics keep going down. And to the KKK people and the white supremacists who basically say everyone's committing genocide against them, you did this to yourself. When you gave women the right to vote in 1920, the white population was 35% of the world. Now it's down to below 10. You did this to yourself. Don't blame anybody else. Because the first human race that gave women rights were white people. Over 100 years ago. And now you see the results. You committed genocide upon yourself. Don't blame anyone else. So you need immigrants to sustain a nation because of the liberal leftist policy. So again, for those people who don't understand, women's rights means the woman goes to work and the state gets a hold of the kids at a much younger age. Those women don't have as many kids. That brings down the demographics of society because as society gets older, the younger population has to support the older people. But if your demographics go down, then it becomes unsustainable. That's why you need immigrants to buy into the system. Don't let these Republicans lie to you. Because of the demographics, because of the changing in society, you need it. So if you actually think about it, leftist policies breed more leftism. Because you gave women's rights, leftist policy. Because you gave gay rights, leftist policy. The demographics came down and you had to bring more immigrants in. Again, more leftist policies. So leftist policies breed leftist policies. See how that works? And if you think the people, the elite, the Rothschilds, didn't know what they were doing, this was all set up. This was all set up from jump. They've been planning this step by step by step for quite a while. And honestly, if you look at it from an outsider's perspective, they did a hell of a job. Because the end goal is this. It's not to steal your money. That's what these politicians do. These puppets do. They jump through hoops to get money. Their elite preach the money. They don't care. The end goal is for them to destroy the family unit and take the child at birth. So that way, not they won't only get the child for daycare, they get the child forever. And once we get to that point in society where the state takes away the kids at birth, that's it. There will be no more opposition. These people will be brainwashed from a young age, and it's game over. So the main focus of this whole thing, women's rights, was to break up the family unit. Now, you might say as a woman, that's not fair. You're right, it's not. You're absolutely right. It's not fair. You know, there's a lot of women out there who can go out there and do the same type of work that men can do. But let's put this in perspective. A female UFC fighter would whoop my ass. No doubt about it. Well, not all of them. A lot of them. Yet, the average woman on the streets, 95% of the time, I'm going to handle them. So yes, there's 5% of women out there who can do the same work as men. Fight in the military, be a badass. But that's 1 out of 20 max. The rest of you are too emotionally triggered. You can be intelligent as hell. But here's what I've noticed with women. When you don't get your way, you start pounding and screaming just like a child. Now, you can call me sexist, you can call me whatever you want. But the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, I'm presenting nothing but facts. Look at the history I showed you. From 1920, what that happened through the feminist movement, through no having more kids. And again, the feminist movement has devastated the black community as well. 77% of black kids are born out of wedlocks. They're raised by single mothers. That breeds poverty, as we talked about in episode 5. So again, in today's episode, we explain what the Aquarius age is, why sea levels are rising, and why China is building cities in the middle of nowhere. People don't even know that. Now you do. And we also explain how women's rights and socialism lead straight to communism, and you're seeing it in front of your own eyes right now. 70% of women are socialists and communists. And again, there's going to be some women that listening to this show right now who are getting offended because they're stone cold capitalists and they're conservative. They might be more conservative than me, and they're like, well, what the hell is this? Well, here's the point, ladies. You're outnumbered 2-1. Every single time you're outnumbered 2-1. So your vote has been canceled out quite a long time ago. This has been episode 6. My name is Garythenumbersguy. And as always, remember, the strong take from the weak. But as the Zionists has proven time after time, the smart take from the strong. I'm out.